Hey, everybody. I like that countdown. It's so suspenseful. We are still waiting for Phillip Andrew Hamilton to join us, but I do have the amazing Stephen Roszel. Ran into him last night at the viewing of What is a Woman, and had the pleasure of getting to know him. Pleasure, I don't know if that's the right word, during his fight with against Chesterfield County last year. And being a civics teacher, and I really wanted to have him jump on and be a part of this discussion about what we're teaching our children as far as history, what social studies is, what civics are, and age appropriateness. And then go into, oh, there he is. Hang on one sec. Okay, I'll bring him on. I said Phillip's here too. So we'll jump in, and I'm going to let these two guys introduce themselves. So, hey, Phillip, how are you?
Yeah, it's going well. Thanks for having me on. I'm a resident of Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm a relative of George Mason the fourth on my mother's side of the family, who wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights that freedom of speech and freedom of religion is based off of. And I'm a historian. I run HamiltonHistoricalRecords.com. I run a political blog, thehamiltonpress.com. I run my own legal services business. I tutor in history. I also tutor in the LSATs. And I'm a political activist, in addition to a former candidate for the Virginia House of Delegates in the 57th District. But thank you for having me on today.
And I wanted to hear, I didn't know last night, I was sitting there talking to Bobby a little bit. I was trying to write like a quick bio about you. Just tell me real quick, because I always find it interesting, people that were former Democrats that, and I don't want to really get into it, but just a little bit about, because how you figured that out in your own mind, because I find that people who, free thinkers who are able to be like, wait a minute, this doesn't line up with what I thought I believed or whatnot. So I just wanted just a tiny blurb about what that was like.
Sure. So when I was growing up, I lived, my parents were both Republican. They had a subscription to the Washington Times, and I got to read a lot of the editorials growing up. But what happened is that when Bush Jr. was president, the Iraq War happened, there was a big anti-war movement. And I had a few friends, and I did go to public school. I went to James Madison High School in Vienna, Virginia. And I think it was folks kind of pulled me into the whole anti-war movement. I believed in some of the lies that I was told, unfortunately. And it caused me to switch from Republican to Democrat when I was a junior in high school. And I actually
you know firsthand what the influence of people around you, and we can see that today, what's going on in schools. It's a kind of a different feel, but so you know firsthand what it's like to be influenced by disinformation,
yes.
And especially being targeted in schools.
Oh, we had Democratic, political members of office who came and spoke at our school, so I heard them in the stadium. There were also students who were saying, oh, we're going to D.C., we're going to go protest the Iraq War. So I went to one of those protests. But it was interesting because when I went to one, I think it was back in 2004 or 2005, between that time frame, there were members of the American Communist Party who were there, and they were giving out pamphlets. I remember that distinctly. And it was my first time really hearing about communists and what they were at the time. But yeah, I mean, the communists were active, back in the Bush administration when I was younger.
Now, when you say the communists, hang on one second. I want to introduce Stephen, and we'll jump in. Sorry. So Stephen Roszel, just how we know each other, or how your part, I just a little of your backstory.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ann. Nice to meet you, Phillip.
Pleasure to meet you.
So I was a career switcher. I was in the private sector for most of my adult life, and reached a point where I wanted to do something else, follow passion more than success. And so decided to pursue a career in education. So I went to grad school at University of Richmond. Became a social studies teacher, secondary, licensed in Virginia. I started teaching. I picked up a 6-month long-term sub position right out of school with Chesterfield County at Robius Middle School. 2 months into it, COVID hit. All long-term subs lost their jobs. So I was kicked to the street. But the principal that summer actually called me and invited me back to the school for a full-term contract to teach 7th and 8th grade, so civics and U.S. history. So I was thrilled. It was a great team over there at Robius for the 2 months that I had gotten to know them. It was an interesting school year, virtual, hybrid, et cetera, pretty difficult for a first-year teacher.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, but I loved it. I mean, it did not feel like work. I mean, I couldn't tell you the amount of times I told my students I'd do this for free. It just really is a passion of mine, especially the U.S. history and civics and government. I found out in the spring of last year that I was going to be transferred due to population levels in the different districts. So I was going to be moved to high school, Monacan High School in Chesterfield. And they asked if I'd be interested in teaching 12th grade AP government. It's kind of like every social studies teacher's like dream job. And it was only going to be my second year.
I remember mine at Midlothian High School, like Coach Olson. He was like this like short little, but I mean, he was an amazing government teacher.
Yeah. So I mean, I was thinking I'd get there in 10 or 15 years, and this was going to be year 2, and I had the opportunity, and so I was really excited. I got AP certified over the summer before school started. Really excited they got rid of the mask mandates. And then that's where Ann and I met. I decided I was going to take a stand against I felt was oppression, not just towards me, but I was going to have to participate in this kind of lack of objective reality. And I just couldn't in good conscience sit there and teach kids that this was okay, either through my actions or enforcement, let alone just my personal feelings on, bodily autonomy. I'd like to be able to breathe and hear other people speak. So as you know, I wasn't going to quit. They tried to get me to quit. I wanted to make them stand on what they believed, and they did. Anne helps me make it very public. But I lost a lot of friends and family members in the process, but have gained a lot of new friends in the process. So right now I'm tutoring, subbing out here in Powhatan County where my family and I live, building a small hobby farm out here with lots of animals and things growing.
Not being subjected to the Chesterfield that has not changed, but it only got worse than she left, which we'll get to that in a second. So Stephen and I met. He was, like he said, principles driven people, which there's too few of, that stand up for their principles and speak truth and speak it to power. And there are ramifications for that. I mean, my circle got very, very small, but I also met amazing people that I didn't have to compromise my beliefs in being a part of their life or their circles. They may not be 15 or 20-year friends, but what I get back in return is the ability to be me freely, is, I think for a lot of us that speak truth unapologetically is kind of the give and take, because it's not an easy thing to do. So thank you, Stephen. You are always a light to Chesterfield County. And slowly we are getting teachers. Unfortunately, my hope is that instead of the mass exodus that we're seeing, is that instead of just fleeing, which is what's happening, that before you flee, at least make a statement, because I get every day, you see like teachers, and there's only so much that I can do. I mean, that you're teaching these children this. So, everybody still talks about Stephen now, right? Phil, back to what you were saying is that,
Sure.
Communism. Okay. So I know that's now I have a random 20th century geopolitical war history degree from Tech. So of the 20th. So my understanding of, whether the last 100 years of history, whether it be from Italy or Hungary or, China, wherever you want to pick, is especially with what we're seeing with children now, is that this has been done. We know how it happens. They have the playbook. We know how it ends. And I've been hearing a lot of people being proud, like and hearing you say that is so you say people were what does communism in America look like? Like when you said that you were at an event.
Well, I've actually read Karl Marx's book, The Communist Manifesto, before, which is essential reading for any conservative, because you have to know your enemy. Just like, this is a war that we're fighting. It's a cultural war. Mm-hmm. So know your enemy, read Rules for Radicals.
Yes, I found that at Second and Charles. I call it spelunking when I don't have my kids, and I can go roaming, because their section of whatever they call it there, you can find the most. I mean, I found a little tiny book, Dewey, which you have to read, like a little tiny Communist Manifesto, Rules for Radical. Yeah, Dewey. If you want to know where, like that and Kinsey, it's like, okay, that's where this is from. But I call it spelunking, because it's like going yard sale shopping. Like you have to like go through and look, but you can find the most but I found Rules for Radicals, which is like literally like they wrote you a book. Like they wrote a book on how they're doing it. Like.
And even though it was written in the 70s, it's very relevant to what's happening today. Because, I mean, you look at the Black Lives Matter riots, you look at the Antifa riots across the country, D.C., Richmond, all the way out to California. You even was it Chaz and Chop in Seattle, and then Portland when they were attacking the courthouse. So, I mean, they're ruthless. They're absolutely ruthless. And they will use violence as a means to achieve their goals. But I wanted to loop back to what caused me to transition from Democrat to Republican. So the Washington Times, I kept on reading it. So even though I was a Democrat temporarily, I kept on reading, and I started doing independent research on the Iraq War. And I was like, wait, I've been told lies about this. And it started to make me question the other folks who I became friends with. And at the end of my senior year, we actually had a debate between myself and Christopher Day. He was the chairman of the Young Republicans at James Madison High School. It ended up becoming more of an agreeing session. And at the end of the debate, he said, you should come right here and join the Young Republicans. And I said, sure, I certainly will. And the jaws of all the club members dropped. It was a very public way to join the Republican Party, but that's what I did. And I have not looked back since then. I joined the executive board of the George Mason University College Republicans. I became the chairman of the Carroll County Young Republicans when I moved to Carroll County, Maryland. After working on Mitt Romney's presidential campaign, I actually joined the Tea Party and became the chairman of the Caroline County Tea Party and was the treasurer of the Tea Party. And that is another very important movement that's been working the fight against the socialists and communist inklings of the Democratic Party that's really been propelled under President Barack Obama.
Yeah. Especially like Obama was, I mean, is that people need to, like, from Clinton to Little Bush, to Obama, and Trump is not, he's not free of any, especially in the education system, is that what they've done is that they've layered so many education policies. It's like people say that every student succeeds was save them from No Child Left Behind. Actually, it doubled down on it. And so, I mean, is that we've crossed party lines. And that, I mean, sometimes I call it the uni party. Sometimes I call it, when you read something, unfortunately, that says bipartisan, it should send off alarms in your head, where it used to be that it could probably be a good thing. And that's kind of, where we are right now, and especially with these history standards, is that people trying to understand is, and after watching What is a Woman yesterday, I wanted to ask you guys, what is history? Like teaching history, what is that?
Well, let me just follow back on something interesting Philip said when you mentioned communism. I just read the other day, actually, Karl Marx, and I'm going to paraphrase this. I hope I don't butcher it, but it was the state must control education, not the family, and specifically addresses the teaching of history in a way that we must change history, we must alter history to fit our political ends. And so it is literally, it has been written out as a goal. So, and I think we're starting to see that now, culturally and societally.
Yeah, I mean, if you read, and James Lindsay, if you're not familiar with him, he breaks, I mean, that's how I started to learn about social emotional learning. And it's not just this fluffy bullying piece, is that it's literally the engineering of children. And then you start to look back at Dewey and Kinsey, and especially the sexualization of the books and the driving of the transgender and all of this stuff. It's a piece of the same, puzzle piece. I mean, it's all part of the same moving system.
But as far as what is teaching history, there's so many different perspectives on it. There's entire books on what is it. What is
how about history versus social studies?
Well, two separate things. I mean, social studies is a blend of course, history. I mean, you would get geography, human geography, world history, U.S. history. Some schools offer programs in, Asian studies, things like that. When you're talking about social studies, it's a broader picture. You're looking at civics, you're looking at economics, so we're talking about stuff like civic duties versus civic responsibilities. And then getting into stuff like government and politics, kind of further along in high school. So as a whole, that's what you're looking at as far as social studies. All of it should be taught objectively. And I liked what Philip said. I've read the Communist Manifesto. Yes, we should not ban any of these things. We should not avoid discussing these topics, these individuals in history, because we gain perspective, especially when we look at it in context with current events. Or trends for the future. But it's unfortunately turned in with the standards. It's a student must know who this person is and must know who this person is, what this date is or this battlefield is by May, whatever, every year, so they can pass their SOL test. That's not really teaching history. There's no connecting as to the cause and effects that I find fascinating in history.
Okay. So that brings up an interesting. So a lot of people, when I challenged critical thinking, like that's one of the words that is for me, is I'm not against critical thinking. I'm against top-down learning, which is teaching kindergartners critical thinking, which is what these standards have evolved into. What they're teaching kindergartners, is I can't even fathom. And I know Stephen, Philip, you actually read more of the, tell us a little bit just about your comment, because I gave you the 400 pages, what your impression of the standards were.
Yes. So let me bring that up. So I want to say thanks for bringing me on Constitution Day, the history of transit learning. This beast of a document, 400 plus pages. I mean, see how thick this is. But that's government for you. They make things way too long. But if you look at the communities, citizens, traditions, and symbols portion, they say, K.2, the student will apply history and social science skills to recognize and demonstrate that being a responsible citizen involves practicing.
What page are you on? Because I'm going to pull that up for them.
Sure. But practicing honesty, self-control, and knowing kindness to one's self and others.
What page are you on?
Responsibility for one's actions.
What page? Sorry.
And so they're talking in this, basically what they're trying to say, and this is page 20 of 402, just to let you know. So instead of teaching social studies and history, they're trying to say, we're trying to groom you into being an ideal citizen. And I guess a social activist, which is really
I was going to
what it
ask you
comes
guys
down
that,
to.
like, what is a responsible citizen? Like, how would, like, I'm so sick of these subjective terms of
Okay,
like,
so I can. So this is actually a further on. If you look at 8th grade civic standards, they define. Bullet pointed out the difference between a civic duty and a civic responsibility, and it's not very vague. So you don't have a duty to vote; you have a responsibility to vote. As a man of 18 years old, you do have the duty to register for the draft. It's not a responsibility. If you're summoned for jury duty, that is a duty, that is not a responsibility. So that's kind of, I don't have the exact page in the standard memorized, but it isn't very vague actually when they talk about the civic responsibilities in the middle school civics. The kindergarten stuff, I mean, it's like, be kind. Okay.
it is, but okay. So, but here it's like, so what he's talking, so communities, this is to me, if I want citizen, okay, if we're talking about, because my big thing is social emotional learning, it's embedded, it's systemic, which is what they call it, which means it's being embedded, these 5 competencies: self-awareness, social awareness, the 5 Castle global competencies they're teaching in all 50 states to everybody, which is scary in itself. But so then we've got the communities. So what Philip was just reading. So this is the history social studies standards of learning for kindergarten: community, citizenship, traditions, and symbols. So here, the student will apply history and social sciences, social skills to recognize and demonstrate that being a responsible citizen involves practicing honesty, self-control, and showing kind. These are 5. I have a 5-year-old in kindergarten. Okay.
Yeah. So these are different, unless are these the updated ones that they're.
This is the new one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the original ones, at least for the 8th grade civics standards, it's very specific. And that being said, these standards in my hands in the classroom they're going to be presented in a different way than something that does have activism as an end goal, or subconsciously or consciously. And so it really is, it's a cultural thing here on interpreting these things. And you can write them and rewrite them all day long. You're not going to change the hearts and minds of the teacher in the classroom.
No, you're not. And it's funny, I was reading an article, I was looking for one thing and I ran into an article, and of course I don't read mainstream media for that exact reason, as they said teachers don't take their political views into the classroom. And I was like, I mean, teachers are human. Like, everybody takes something. Nobody is free of leaving, but I'm sorry.
Well, also everything has been politicized now.
Oh, absolutely. Everything, like literally everything.
Objective reality, facts, truth have been politicized now to the point where
there are no facts, like according to I mean, as we saw last night watching the movie. But, and so for me, I read this and I'm reading and I'm saying, what are you doing to 5-year-olds? Because, and it's, taking responsibility for one's actions at 5. And so that's what you and I were talking about earlier, is setting these standards.
I mean, that's all everybody stuff that families should be responsible for.
100%. Like, it's values, morals.
I didn't go to teaching to do that.
No, it's values. More people are like, what's your problem? It's not about bullying. First of all, I can pull it up for you. It's 100% not. Anybody can find it. I've done 8 shows on it. It's not about bullying. It's not about empathy, because even they've twisted all of the words. It's about conformity. It's about collaboration. And so it leads, but literally, like, the verbiage here, you could go to the health standards of learning, current, the SEL standards of learning. It's literally all the same document now. I mean, in a sense, is everything is it's feelings and emotions. History, if you were to read this, it's how they feel about history, or how they feel, and then and it's like, what are you actually teaching? And so, Philip, I'll jump back to you, since you kind of did more of a deeper dive into this. as to what you thought reading this.
Well, and another thing I'll bring up is that I think it was in 1963, I believe, there was a congressional hearing about communism in America and their influence. And they actually had tenets that were brought forth by the American Communist Party. And, one of them was to disassociate citizens from the founding fathers of America, like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Benjamin Franklin, and many others, and that's to demonize those who helped found this country. So they've been very successful in doing that. In Charlottesville, Virginia, where I live, where they've been criticizing Thomas Jefferson, there's a picture of a protester giving Thomas Jefferson the middle finger while the banner TJ was a racist is unveiled right in front of the statue in front of the rotunda. And, they had that in a big poster in the Shirley Albert Special Collections Library in the basement of that building on UVA. But it was right across from another exhibit, which is about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the positive aspects of the founding of this nation. So really, as I mentioned on Constitution Day, and I'll mention it again, it's a tale of two Charlottevilles, and it's a tale of two Americas that's going on. But this congressional committee back then, they found out that the communists wanted to separate children from their parents. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? Well, you create a wedge, gender fluidity, saying I'm not a he or a she, I'm a they or a them, or some other of the 100 genders that they're putting out there. I know Matt Walsh was excellent in his documentary, What is a Woman?, in attacking this movement. And they've been very successful. I've met many parents who said that, unfortunately, some of them are, divorced, but they're saying that the other parent is creating a wedge between me and my own child by pushing this gender ideology as a toxic poison in their mind. And now they don't want to visit me anymore. They want to stay at the father's house. They want to stay at the mother's house. So they have created a wedge.
They're gender affirming, which is, again, it's not a parent's role. Like, this was my and to take it out of the transgenders is that my daughter, I know how I raised my daughter in my home, but at 11 years old, when she came home from Chesterfield County Middle School and she started saying stuff and challenging me, which I know how I raised my child, before I knew what was any of this is going on, or that what the questions they were asking them constantly, incessantly, is they're teaching them not just about, they're to question their gender and then challenge their parents. They're literally they're teaching them all of this stuff is that they talk about like a caring adult, and they're not talking or like someone caring in the community. So when we talk about grooming is a word that is people, it's one of those, it's the word now that'll get you canceled. Well, I'm sorry, but just because I'm saying you're grooming a child, I'm not calling you a pedophile. I'm saying that urging children who are not fully developed in the brain to encourage them into a certain behavior is grooming. And I'm not calling you a pedophile. I'm not saying that you're trying to have sex with my child, but it's the same thing that we're saying. Why do you think that the number of transgender or children in gender dysphoria has quadrupled, especially here in Chesterfield, in like 13 months? Is because they figured out real quick that the teachers that are pro this stuff, these kids are getting treated better. They're coddled because, so it's grooming because, and that's what, we have to face here in Chesterfield, especially because we've been living, like everybody wants to talk about Fairfax and Loudoun. Like we've had the most radical policy for 13 months that now we have to work on undoing because you can't, what's been done in 13 months, those kids are, it's, so there is that you have to, and we still have parents that contact me and they say, they won't let me in my child's school. And I'm like, why are you sending your child to a school that you can't go in? Like during COVID, I wouldn't even allow that. So it's the amount, you have to remember how many hours a week you're entrusting your children to a system that we can't trust. Is that, and then I tell them how to go into get the app to go into their assignments and it's exhausting. I did it all last year. But is that this stuff is embedded. And then when my daughter came home telling me that she had generalized anxiety disorder and she needed therapy, because that's what they're teaching when they teach about emotions all day long, incessantly, is that you're going to have children that believe. And so having it bleed literally into every single curriculum as these are written, is, I mean, for me, like, it's blatantly obvious.
Yes, but see, this is the thing, and you don't have to do it.
No, you don't.
So
No,
every morning,
exactly.
Every morning there was a new video, an SEL, social emotional learning video from our counseling department. It might be a minute and a half long. It might be 15 minutes long and address different things during different times of the year. Some of it was fairly harmless, but I came across so many that I frankly did not show my kids because I just did not think it was appropriate. It wasn't necessary. Or I would show it to them and use it as a learning opportunity to discuss another side of the same story.
Right.
Or another side of the same position.
Yeah.
But you have to do your due diligence as a teacher. And let's be honest, a right-leaning teacher is a minnow in shark-infested waters in public education, unfortunately.
I'm going to jump to, because I wanted that, I sent you guys the 8th grade civics lesson that we've recently gotten, the one I was talking about that came in from Bailey Bridge. And then yesterday we got from Tomahawk. And you guys both made some interesting points, because there's a couple of questions that are obviously, that's CRT. Like, I don't like saying anything is CRT because it's obviously critical race theory. One of the questions you shouldn't be asking 8th graders. We'll get, so I'm going to pull up the screen. Let's figure out who wants to actually, this was sent home. Now, my knowledge of Chesterfield County is one teacher sending it from one school might be a fluke, like you said, Stephen, because they give them resources and standards with no actual curriculum or anything like that. But the fact that it's two, and it's two of the notorious middle schools for pushing this stuff, you don't ever hear about this except when my daughter was there at Swift Creek, because I found stuff. But this stuff, it's not fair to children, say Midlothian, Tomahawk, Bailey, the same schools continuously, where you have other schools not being subjected to it. But so, and there were, so let's jump in. All right. So this is again 8th grade. If you had to choose, now, would you rather have a smaller government providing fewer services or a bigger government providing more services? Who wants to answer?
Smaller government.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how I would answer as well. Okay.
Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Okay. And like you said, what did you say earlier? Is that these are 8th graders forming their political identities, which will be, is that it violates PPRA, first of all. But
so I do have an aside on that one.
Huh?
I do have an aside on that. And so I was fascinated looking through these when you sent them earlier. So I gave a test with the same purpose when I was teaching 8th grade civics. However, the caveat was I didn't want them. Don't turn them in for me. It was for the kids to kind of get an idea of how they feel. But it was actually a much more legitimate one than this. But I don't think it's a bad thing for a student to start to have those kind of internal discussions with themselves or discussions with their families about these kinds of beliefs. They usually mirror their parents anyway at that age.
But under PPRA, parents have to be notified.
So all this time it's posted, but if you're not collecting any work, if it's not to be turned in, it's not to be seen. It's just
everything's done on a computer now. Yeah. So, I mean, collected or not. I mean, there's nothing other. There's no paper. There's no textbooks. So, I mean, and that's the thing is that where's transparency in education if we can't see curriculum, if they tell it, if we don't have books to look through or test. But so which of the following statements come closest to your view? America's openness to people from all over the world is essential to who we are as a nation. If America is too open to people from all over the world, we risk losing our identity as a nation.
Well, in that question, they're trying to, push, the immigration ideology,
Right.
trying to force the student to choose one way or the other. Do you support open borders? Do you support closing the border and having like immigration quotas, et cetera, et cetera?
There's no in between. There's no that's my issue here is that there's no there's no middle ground. There's no, I don't think either way. Is because I wouldn't agree with either of those statements.
The premise of the whole question is faulty.
Right.
It assumes it assumes a zero-sum game here on it, and it's not the case.
So, the reason we're picking answers is because what it spits out at the end. So we'll just say that America's too open. In general, would you say experts who study a subject for many years are usually better at making good policy decisions about subject than other people? Usually worse. Neither better nor worse at making good policy decisions. So this would have to go, is that because now they're driving in that
this is if you like Fauci or not.
Right. This is the specialists, the people who have gone to school and who talk about, this is science isn't science like that. This is, I would say usually better, but I don't know what would an 8th grader these days say? Probably worse. I mean,
from what I understood, 8th graders distrusted the media and government people, politicians, a lot more than
they would probably say usually worse. I don't know. I'm thinking like when they're talking, I'm like, well, who are
just pick one. I mean, I think neither better nor worse. You can
I'll say that one.
Be an expert in.
I've taken it like 8 times to see the ridiculous,
and not know how to run the
You can take many times just to test how many what idiotic level of right or left they'll spit you out as because it's entertaining in itself. Thinking about increased trade of goods and services between the U.S. and other nations in recent decades, would you say that the U.S. has gained more than it has lost because increased trade has helped lower prices and increase competitiveness of some U.S. businesses? Lost more than it has gained because increased trade has cost jobs in manufacturing and other industries and lowered wages for some U.S. workers. Now, before I answer, this would have to be something that they're taught, to be able to answer this. And I'm sitting here reading it going,
so it's macroeconomics, and you're not getting into that in 8th grade.
Yeah.
But obviously they are.
Another question in which the premise is completely faulty.
And explain that real quick.
So you can't explain international, macroeconomic international trade setups in one sentence like that. It's not a one or the other.
Right.
I mean, you have tariffs, but there's other much more things in a complex international economy that's involved. In addition to
cartels,
tariffs.
Legal cartels. The premise is completely faulty.
Let's see. I'm gonna say lost more it's gained. How much more, if anything, needs to be done to ensure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds?
I think the Constitution is pretty clear. We all have equal rights, and I don't think you need to do anything.
You know what? As Dr. Ben Clarkson said last week when I saw him at the Richmond Convention Center, we're all guaranteed equal rights, but we're not guaranteed special rights.
Yeah. Nothing at all.
And I love equal opportunity versus equal outcomes. That's the whole thing. You can never equal the outcome. But
they've
and
changed
it's
equality. They've changed the definition of of equity from equality. They've switched them.
yeah. You can't ever have, even if you have, that's the thing, is that the appearance of equal outcomes means that it's false, it's a lie, and that somewhere along the way, children got pushed through without an education, because you can't ever have equal outcomes. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Equity is a way of granting special rights and for justifying special rights for certain students.
Strictly based on skin color, we have to be clear about that. Is if they were doing equity based on actual socioeconomic status, which they could never do and pull that, then that would be different. But it's strictly not done that way. But yeah, it's interesting what Tina Ramirez said last night is when she said, hearing her say that trans rights are not human rights. It's like, I say these things, you're a transphobe, but it's like human rights, and then you have privileges, and then you have, that's how far removed that we are, is that parents' rights are now, which are in the Constitution, they're in the Virginia Constitution, the Supreme Court. I mean, I birthed these children, whatever you want to say, is that parents' rights are under question, and we're fighting for an actual a fundamental American right. I mean, and that now the trans rights of children have now superseded as how far we've become removed from reality. But hearing her say that it's not an actual fundamental right, I was like, thank you. I'm like, but last night was awesome. I thought the panel was great.
That's good to hear. And I was glad to hear. Delegate John McGuire. He told me about Governor Youngkin's executive order on the bathrooms on Constitution Day as well. And yeah, I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of children who came out protesting the governor's order yesterday. But we had folks like my Democratic opponent, Delegate Sally Hudson, who voted for a bill that made reporting of sexual assault optional. Mm-hmm. And it really segued, you didn't have to report it to the police, but really what happened in Loudoun County is that you had a boy who was wearing a skirt who raped a girl in the girl's bathroom. It wasn't reported to the police. The father went to the Loudoun County School Board, was arrested for speaking out, and the board denied it. I mean, it was completely criminal.
No, and that board and that supervisor and that superintendent are still sitting there. Yeah. And so I work with Loudoun a lot, as I tell them, the board's responsibility is that we elect them, they hire him. So they're all responsible for him still sitting there. He should have been fired by now. So they're all complicit in it. But this, even raising the question, so I would say nothing at all for that. But I will say this is that Chesterfield County, we've had rape, we've had assaults, we've had, numerous, and our policy is, but we're the 60,000 that I guess just doesn't have enough. I just don't think that I don't know what's wrong with Chesterfield County, but there's nothing different that's going on in Fairfax. Kids pronoun for, children, 6th graders being stood up and can't sit down until they say their pronoun.
Wow.
Like, they're like, I don't want to say my pronoun, and people saying that you have to, like, that's reality here. And if it was in one of those, it would be all over the news across. So, and
that's compelled speech, which is a violation of the First Amendment. You can't compel students to say things against their will.
Right. And that's what I tell people, is that this is not a cultural war. It's a constitutional war. Is that we really have to dumb down what we're fighting and stop playing whack-a-mole and just return to logic and the law, or we're going to be fighting this forever. So which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Business corporations make too much profit. Most corporations make a fair, reasonable profit. So, Steve, I see you're sitting there like 8th grade. What, like?
So I'm a big fan of not using words like most, always, all.
But that's even how the psychological assessments on these kids are done. These behavior screeners. It's the all, always, almost, never, never. Sometimes all. The ones that I just sit there when I have to answer them at 42 years old, and I'm just like, And these are behavior screeners that track these kids forever. That's how the teachers have to answer them.
See, I don't look at feelings. I look at
everything is
data.
feelings now, Stephen.
Is the company providing an excellent product or service, and are they managing their labor force well, reinvesting into the company and growing? I mean, that sounds like they're doing a good job.
But again, is this what 8th grade civics is about?
No.
Okay.
No. We're lucky if we get to economics by the end of the year, even though we're supposed to teach it. We're lucky we get to it.
I'm thinking like I grew up here. I'm thinking like, but see, I graduated the year before they started standards here. And I'm like, is that why I'm so far behind? I actually got an academic education. Like, I don't like, this is just like foreign to me because this stuff, the 300 pages, if you didn't pull it up for the curriculum, it was like stuff that I took, sociology, women's study. I mean, just crazy stuff that is like higher, like college level stuff. The curriculum, I mean, it read like literally like your freshman or sophomore year in higher education is the classes that these kids are taking now when our literacy rate is abysmal. But
well, I posted something on my my tutoring website, my Facebook page for my tutoring company. It's an old, I think it was from 1912, a test they did in Tennessee. It was to pass 8th grade. Most adults today would not be able to pass this test.
No, I pulled up the standards of like the actual test that they took. I think it was in third grade from, I guess the last time they did because they like to post it, I guess like 2017. And I was sitting there, I'm like, no wonder these kids are failing these things. Like, how are you asking third graders these questions? And it's all this like critical, it's like new math. People are like, what is this? And it's critical thinking. It's not teaching children arithmetic. They're going to teach them, it's top down. We're going to teach them how to think outside the box. And then maybe we'll eventually get to like arithmetic or, the basics of the facts. Is that I was reading these questions and I was like, how in the world is a third grader expected to answer this? No wonder we are at the bottom of the nation, 50th, the only state below proficient in 2019 for literacy, the only state. And all of that happened since we adopted the career to workforce education in 2009. So you can put those pieces together yourself.
Well, when you have social justice questions thrown into mathematics, I mean, that just kind of drives it down too, because mathematics is supposed to be apolitical completely. Don't inject politics in mathematics, period. It distracts the children. Yep.
It's like DeSantis, that whole thing. The reason I tell people don't say CRT is because the Florida Department of Education actually put out, like they published some of these actual, it's not CRT, it's social emotional learning. There were some overtly racist questions in there, but a lot of this stuff that it's not math. It's how would you explain to Johnny how you could make 5 + 5 = 11? Like that, that's what I'm talking, like, that's the kind of, like, when I talk about like critical, like, okay, if you're 18 or 17 and you've learned pretty much everything you need to know, then let's start thinking about ways that you can make that make sense. But when you're starting that as the foundation of education, you're going to have a generation of dumbed down students. Like, a 5th grade math assignment being like, and it's a cartoon, like, how do you explain to so-and-so? And it's all of this, when you hear about this, think outside the box, this new entrepreneurship, all of this crazy words that they use. And I'm like, how is anybody getting an education? But anyway, so how much, if all, would it bother you to regularly hear people speak a language other than English in public places in your community?
Not at all.
Not at all. I think that this is the one that really blew me up, is that on a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 means you're cold and negative as possible, and 100 means you're warm and positive, how do you feel about Democrats? Phil,
They
how
have
did
no
you
business
explain
asking
that?
that question. Yeah.
What is you pigeonholed? Is that what you
Which
said?
Democrat? I don't know. I know some really nice Democrats, and I know some complete jerk Democrats.
Right.
Like, there's a
You
problem. We're not
got
looking at
liberal,
people as
leftist, conservative,
individuals.
like Rhino. I mean, you forgot. But to even ask an 8th grader, how do you feel about Democrat? Like, I was like, I'm just going to put 0 for both and see what the odds come out.
And just to add to that, because in what you sent me, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, it says in A, no student shall be required as part of any program specified in section 98.1 A or B to submit without prior consent to psychiatric examination, testing or treatment, or psychological examination, testing or treatment, in which the primary purpose is to reveal information concerning any one of the following. And it says number 1, political affiliations.
Yes.
Yep.
And people think PPRA is a myth. Listen, it's not a myth, because my daughter's 6th grade principal last year wrote all of her teachers and said, you cannot talk to Ms. Tatus's daughter about these 8 things that's listed on PPRA. And I got confirmation from every single one of them: political beliefs, mental beliefs, income, parental beliefs, religious beliefs, all the stuff that they're doing. And so it does exist, and it's how I've gotten this county to force opt-outs available to parents. It's very real. And until we acknowledge federal law, and PPRA is in the Virginia Constitution too, this will continue to happen, is that we don't need more laws, like Tina said last night too, Stephen. We need to acknowledge the laws that we already have.
Yeah, I was pleased with her answer on that.
No, that was it. We don't need more laws. And I wrote it, and I'm not calling it Parental Bill of Rights, but Transparency in Education, and Nick Freitas has it. And it's all it is a reiteration of what we are already given. And it's sad that we have to put it all into one document to make education transparent. Is that we put it all together, and I don't want to call it a Parent Bill of Rights, because for some reason that's triggering.
Wouldn't need any of it, Ann, if we pass a good school choice bill in which gave
exactly
parents the money where they could bring it to wherever they wanted to for education.
Yep. But unfortunately, like I told Freitas, is that I watched Winsome Sears when she tried to talk about lab schools. Somebody asked the question.
Pointless. I've read that legislation over and over again.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Because
not only that, it's against the law, because it has the stipulation of it has to be non-secular. And if the main case, I already told them, and I said, try to push this through. And they already found you can't, it's against the Constitution. You can't make that. But Winsome said, she said school choice will not happen until we get the Senate. And so, unfortunately,
they're not. I've talked to a bunch of legislators recently, and some running and somebody already in office, and they don't know how to write a school choice bill. They don't know where to look. They're looking at micro schools,
because
schools, vouchers. These are all ridiculous.
Yeah, charter schools. Like we got had by Youngkin on charter schools, because we've had the same 7 since 1998. And didn't know any better. We didn't even really know what a charter school was. And as a former parent for Youngkin, and so any choice at that point sounded good. But charter schools it removes less parental control, because they don't have school boards, but they're using publicly funded money. And so unfortunately,
let the public use their own money.
Right. Yes. But correctly, it needs to be written, and the overall goal has to be to stop taking federal funds, because at the end of the day, $600 per pupil isn't worth us signing over our state rights to take a federal curriculum, or any federal. The grants, the amount of money that we get, if counties were to properly budget and give them money that they're supposed to give to the kids, which has just vanished. Like, I can't even tell you how many millions of IDEA money is missing from this county. Why? Because they can use it for SEL. I mean, I could tell you 100 reasons about where the money goes, and it's not going to the SPED kids. And if anybody has been violated by the state for decades, it's been the special education kids and the parents. But if you had a Title I child and they found out that their Title I money was being taken and used for some other program, this is how sad it is. You have the ACLU, then you have 800 people lined up to Southern Private Law Firm to sue these people and to find these kids money. But these poor SPED parents, and they're fighting just to get their kids educated. It's awful. But which of these statements best describes your opinion about the United States? This is what I have a problem with. Is I just consider it anti-American. Like I just don't think that you should be teaching or asking any questions about problems with the United States. The U.S. stands above all other countries in the world. The U.S. is one of the greatest countries in the world, along with some others. There are other countries that are better than the U.S.
So yeah, they're trying to combat, the exceptionalism of our country. And we do live in a great country, despite all the problems that we have. The vision
Right.
of the founding fathers has persevered for well over 200 years. But this is just subtly, trying to say, okay, question your country, and eventually, let's question the Pledge of Allegiance, because I'm sure there's some teachers. There's that one who last year said, well, we don't put the American flag up during the Pledge of Allegiance. We put the LGBTQ plus flag instead. We pledge allegiance to that. And This is just one way of segueing children away from being patriotic towards their own nation.
What do you think, Stephen?
I've done a lot of traveling in my life, and I'll tell you, and studying history, and Philip, you can probably agree with me. I don't think there's any better place or any time period in the world than America right now.
No,
even
and that's
with all of our problems.
Even with all of our problems, there's people in other countries that look and they go. I mean, I've seen people that are like, you guys are the freedoms that you have, and the way
the
that
poorest of our poor in the top 1% or 0.5% of the world's population. It's religious freedom. I mean, the UN just came out with their new numbers, and it's up to 50 million slaves in the world right now. Like, America's a pretty good place to be right now.
It is an amazing place, and I would challenge, and that's why the people who hate it so much won't leave. Like, they want to change it instead of just leaving. They don't like America. I tell them, then you go find somewhere else where there's already communism established. But that's my problem, is that there's no better place to be. And teaching children anything other than that is a lie.
I mean, I like to visit other places.
Oh yeah, visit, but you want to come home. Like,
that's right.
A good Spanish tapas bar sounds delicious.
Exactly,
right
but you want to come home.
Yeah, I look forward to the flight back.
Yeah. So how much of a problem, if any, would you say some of the following are in the country today? People being too easily offended by what others say. Major problem.
Major problem.
People saying things that are very offensive to others in comparison to being the level of offensiveness versus the things that are actually being said.
So you have a right to freedom of speech, but you don't have the right to not be offended.
Yeah. Right.
That's not in the Bill of Rights.
Right. But do you think, and this is where, if you look back, on when we started, I guess, when political correctness, when that started to come into play, decades ago, being politically correct. There's a great article out by Stella Morabito, and she, she wrote an article called "Groupthink Leads to Genocide," and she starts talking about political correctness is where all of this began, and it's how people become so offended, and that it literally shuts us up, and that's how we become silent, is that everything offends everybody. So then, and it's psychological manipulation. So I would say it's a major problem, but I would say that the amount of things that are actually being said that are being pushed back that are offensive I wouldn't say it's not a problem, but I would say it's a minor problem.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember when I got fired from Chesterfield, the amount of people that posted online some really, really nasty things.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, I got attacked on here because my brain works faster than people, and because I've been clean for 15 years, people want to call me a junkie all the time, and it's just to the point where I'm like, if that's all you got, like, I don't care, bring it. But people are nasty. That's for sure. Which comes closer to your view of candidates for political office, even if neither is exactly right? I usually feel like there's at least one candidate who shares most of my views. None of the candidates represent my views well. Coming from a mom, like my daughter's in 7th grade now, is that I didn't know enough about, I mean, when I turned 18, I didn't know enough. And maybe that was a bad thing, but I don't think that 8th graders should know enough about politics in general. I think that their lives should be about being in 8th grade and worry about who you're going to the next dance with.
Yeah.
That's just stupid. Like, to worry about, like, these questions just seem ridiculous. Like, is that just me, or is this an overstep? Or,
well, something I'll add to this is that this is another thing, you know, that they're pushing an agenda to also lower the voting age. You see, like, I used to live in Santa Cruz, California, so
okay,
I visited San Francisco, and I would pick up the San Francisco Chronicle, but they actually passed like laws locally that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can vote in local races. So, like, you know, the San Francisco City Council, you know, school board, and other things like that.
you can vote, but you can't, like, smoking is now 21. Like,
correct. Yes, you can't smoke a cigarette in California until you're 21 years of age, but you can vote when you're 16. You know, in certain cities. So,
And you can cut your penis off too.
Yeah, I mean, you can change your, like, gender, but that's the whole thing. Like, this whole thing, I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, am I back on the 9th dimension on Earth X? Like, things can't get any more bizarre. Like, cigarettes will kill you, but you can decide what gender you are and mutilate your body when you're 13. Like, I
got to take a buy on this one, like, or a pass on this one. Like, I have a healthy distrust for almost all politicians. So.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm with
people
you,
like Tina. I was at a thing a few weeks ago where Tina was there, and it was someone's house, and I told her the same thing right to her.
I mean, listen, they listen to me, but they don't like me. You know, but when I say you're going to be in my county, you're going to run in my county, then, I mean, my healthy distrust becomes a very healthy advocate. I'm going to sit down and grill you, because at this point it's stupid or swamp swimming is what I call it. And if you actually legitimately don't understand what's going on, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tell you, and then it becomes on you, because you can no longer claim you're stupid.
Yeah, and people need to know what time it is.
And then you become swamp swimming. So is that once you're educated as to what's going on in the system, and you can sit and you continue to vote for this stuff that's destroying our children, you can't claim stupid anymore. You've now become part of the establishment. But I would just say none. Okay. This is the one that is straight critical race theory. In general, how much do white people benefit from advantages in society that Black people do not have? There's absolutely no objectivity there. Like, it's not even do they, it's not even like could it be. It's straight how much. Mm-hmm. So people want to, it's like anybody that from now on in Virginia wants to say critical race theory is not being taught. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this question. This is 100% how much do. There's no equity involved in it. This is straight oppressor oppressed. You have critical race theory right here.
They're pushing the idea of white privilege down these students' throats.
Yeah.
And that's how you can get folks to join the social justice movement, because you're saying, well, you know, racism is still a poison that's across the entire nation. And, you know, they're trying to magnify things and make things seem much, much worse than they actually are. I mean, we've gotten much better as a nation. We're closer to quality in modern times than we ever have been before. You know, with Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights movement. Actually, I got to meet Clarence Benjamin Jones, a former speechwriter and attorney for Martin Luther King Jr. in East Palo Alto. It was a day before the 50-year anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. He came and spoke to us before flying back to Memphis, Tennessee for another speech, because he was in Memphis the day he got the news of the assassination. But the members of the civil rights movement, they were more spiritual people. They focused on Christian principles. They felt it was godly for them to fight for voting rights and, for equal opportunity for blacks and whites. And, I certainly empathize with what they did, especially in the fight on Bloody Sunday and many other events during civil rights movements. And, Martin Luther King's house was bombed in one of his homes. And they made a lot of sacrifice at the time. But now, but now they're trying to equate, and they're trying to lump in the trans movement and the LGBTQ plus movement into the civil rights movement of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and in the 70s. And it's not the same thing. If you look at history, if you study what happened, those are not the same movements. I mean, right now it's more of a sacrilegious, atheistic movement that's fighting against Christianity, that wants, God out of schools.
They've already got God out of schools. Now it's monuments, it's schools being renamed. It's literally the eradication of all American history. And Hitler did it. It's already been done. The statues being taken down, everything being renamed. Literally the obliteration. The only difference is that Western society is so new in this world. Why do you think that, in 400 years, we've come to crash and burn quicker than any, is that we don't have thousands of years of foundation of religion and beliefs. They don't have to come in and, murder all of our scholars. People are not that founded in their belief system. It's been very easy for them to come in and destroy because we don't have thousands of years of history.
Right.
So I don't know. I like to mess with this thing and see what crazy it's going to spit out. Do you think greater social acceptance of people who are transgender, people who identify as a gender that is different from the sex they were assigned at birth, is very good, somewhat good, neither good nor bad, somewhat bad, very bad? Trying to think like an 8th grader. I'm just going to put, I think it's somewhat good for society. It's in total chaos with the answer I probably just answered. Overall, would you say people who are convicted of crimes in this country serve? This is baiting. Like, to me, this is just a sign of, what are you teaching in school? Because if you're asking if criminals are getting
did you rob a liquor store, or were you Jeffrey Dahmer? It's like,
right.
There's a distinction there about.
Well, obviously, this is for me, is that if taking into account they believe that schools are a pipeline to prison. Well, they're actually right, except it's not the resource officers that they blame. It's the fact that they haven't had discipline in 15 years in schools. Like, so
also, they're both institutions. Like, they're institutionalized when they come out of them.
Yeah. So we're gonna go. Let's say they spend way too much time in prison. Which of the following statements come closest to your view? Religion should be kept separate from government policies. Government policies should support religious values and beliefs. Now, this one's interesting because the separation of church and state, I hear a lot as something that's an argument that's one of those vagueness of, like, how would you guys interpret this one?
I think the premise again is wrong. Government policy should support religious values and beliefs. They're just constitutionally not allowed to endorse one.
Right.
And it does not say religion and government are separate in the Constitution anywhere.
Right.
It just says you can't endorse one or can't prohibit anybody from exercising theirs.
I would call it word salad is what I would call this.
Yeah.
Like,
well, the founding fathers, they established a separation of church and state because you had the Church of England, and it was these state sanctions sect of Christianity that they endorsed. So they want to prevent something like that from happening in America. But it doesn't mean that our government is completely absolved of any support of any religion, because we certainly want Judeo-Christian values, which was part of the founding of our nation, to continue to exist in our government. Especially pertaining to debts, because if we were actually following those values, we wouldn't have a 30+ trillion, dollar debt. But here we are today, right?
Right. I'm gonna go with that one. I'm totally confused. I like confusing algorithms. Oop. All right. Why are you highlighted? Oop. All right. I don't know what I highlighted. Okay, there we go. In the future, do you think U.S. policy should try to keep it so America is the only military superpower? It would be acceptable if another country became as military powerful as the U.S. How do you ask 8th graders this? I don't.
Actually, I taught my class the answer to this, and I never told them.
What is it? I would like to know.
So, dearly departed Rush Limbaugh used to say, "The world is governed." I'm going to have to paraphrase. The world is governed by the threat or the use of deadly force. Sorry, guys. Military should be strong. We should be able to protect ourselves from any external threat.
Scary. I mean, my husband, he did 4 tours in Afghanistan, Marja, the pit of hell, and then served 5 years at the Iraqi embassy in ambassador protection detail. And I would not trust him to be in the military right now because of the state that it's in. And that's a very scary place that everybody should be thinking about, is the state of our military if something was to go down right now. It's not a good place. So let's see what kind of madness it says tonight of that.
And I'll send you the one that I used. And actually, it was a paper copy. It wasn't a digital click on this. You just did it. And
you still had paper back then?
Well, no. So the kids could just look at it and write it down on their own paper.
Okay.
Yep.
So I
just found it in my files, so I'll send it over to you. It's
okay.
It's a lot better.
I'm an ambivalent right. What is an ambivalent right? Young and politically cross-pressured, conservative on economic issues of race and gender, less on immigration and social issues.
Doesn't ambivalent mean you don't know where you are?
Yeah.
When someone's ambivalent about something, they're lost.
So I guess I'm trying to say more libertarian, because I guess some libertarians are more liberal on social issues, like LGBTQ rights.
But young and politically cross-pressured is the one that I'm like, that's the part that I'm like, what? They're 8th graders. Maybe they just don't understand what the hell you're asking them. And then you're assigning them a title now. That's and I've taken this, I've gotten ambivalent right, literally, and I've answered this, I'm like, just to play with it. 90% of the time I can, but you throw one wrench in the gear, you're ambivalent right. It's very rare that I've, and anybody that wants to play around and take this, I'll put that in the comments. But I always do that. So anybody that wants to play and take that. So yeah, that would be Chesterfield County public school system currently going on. I'm sure that I have emails from the county right now responding to me on this because they were quick to act when it was one school the other day. And so now that it's 2 schools, it's become a very big problem. So guys, it was a pleasure. I do want to get into actual standards.
Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to see if you could bring up is, could you bring up those screenshots I send you for the A is for activists for the elementary school students? I think it'd be a good thing to show the audience.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to look up, but Chesterfield County has you can look up on your child's website, their school website. And we are working on book transparency because, like I told them, if you're proud of it, then own it. But so yeah. So this is one, I think, like you said, Astronomani made public. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. And this is what, popular in elementary schools?
That's the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, I should read some of the passages in there.
Okay, let's see here. Healthy food is a human right. Honeydew, Yakima, Havarti cheese, hummus, hot dogs. eat healthy food. B is for banner, bobbling in the sky, billowing in the breeze. C is for co-op, cooperating cultures.
Co-op.
Oh, co-op is one of those. Sorry, people, if I'm
No, that's what
doxing
Marx
you.
call for. Cooperative.
Everything. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll see co-op, cooperate, collaborate, but it's like literally every other word. I'm gonna shut this out instead of blasting people.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And another thing I'll mention too is that
go ahead.
they're pulling up here. They say D, little D democracy, more than voting, you'll agree. Dictators detest it. Donkeys don't get it. But you and me, we demand equality. And then in the next one, they say equal rights, black, brown, or white. Environmental justice is our right. Where we each live, work, and play, clean and healthy is the way. I mean, clearly pushing a specific agenda to elementary school children. I mean, that does not belong in the classroom.
An ABC board book. I'm looking at it now. So real quick. So up here, this one, it says radical reds. The headline said ruinous rioters. The rumors spread. Rabble rousing riffraff. Really, that's R.
And that's ironic because they're trying to say that, if you're in the social justice movement, rioting is just a rumor. I mean, we saw what happened with Black Lives Matter, with Antifa, with people getting hurt with the statues coming down. Luis Lucas, there was a Confederate statue that was yanked down and someone almost died and she was charged with a felony, but the prosecutor didn't go ahead with the case. But we saw what happened, Chop, in Seattle, and all these other mines getting taken down across the country, and buildings getting burnt down. Minority-owned businesses, Black, Asian, Middle Eastern businesses getting burnt down, and in various states in the Midwest and other parts of the country. There was certainly violence. So it's rewriting history and giving our students a false narrative on what happened. And even look before 2020. I mean, there was rioting. In 1992 with Rodney King, and then you go back in the 70s after Martin Luther King.
How do you not call that rioting? Like, I mean, it's like I went to school to be a journalist and have done nothing because by the time I got out in 2002 out of college, it had already warped into and that was years ago with the infancy of like technology algorithms, bias bubbles. I mean, people, there's no wonder that, Hitler did it dropping flyers from airplanes and with like a radio, and he was able to, murder 10 million people. Imagine like with what we have now where they're feeding you what you want to know and like literally altering your reality is,
and then you have a president who, calls, was it MAGA supporters, a domestic terrorists, while up in Pennsylvania, and saying the biggest threat to America.
Parents, domestic, and and as long as we continue to accept it, is that what I tell people is, like I said, we have 100 years of history of how this ends up, and to think that our hubris is so great that we're above that. I'm sorry, guys, but we know how this end game is. So. It's been a pleasure. Stephen, thank you. You can go back to farming.
My pleasure. Good to see you again last night. There's a lot of people I hadn't seen in a while.
Yeah, it was a good time. We're actually going to be showing the Mind Polluters. I don't know if you've seen that.
No.
It's more focused on the books on SEL. We're going to meet the 9th at the Great American Ranch. But it's one that I don't know how. I looked around and it's been big. It came out last year around the nation, but it's called the Mind Polluters, and it's similar, except it's more about like what we've been talking about, the history of the sexualization of children and the communist pedophilia, and how that they've taken parents away from, or they've taken children, directed them away from using these exact same tactics. So I think that's a Sunday. It's the 9th at 2:00. We'll be doing that at the Great American Ranch. So Philip, I hope you can come down for that.
Yes, I plan on coming down that Sunday. So I'll see you there.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
Pleasure to meet you all.